This meeting is being recorded.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Bufala, and I'm going to be the moderator for today's event. Welcome to today's Lunch with Mia, Ask the Experts on Disaster Preparedness. This event does include the option for closed captioning. In the meeting controls, you should see a button for closed caption or CC. If you click on the closed caption or CC icon, the option will appear for live transcript. This option will show live dialogue on your screen. Before we get started, we'll do a quick poll to see how everyone got here today. If you could please take a minute to enter a response into the poll. All right, and thank you for everyone for your answers. September is Disaster Preparedness Month. Disaster Preparedness Month is an opportunity for homeowners, families, communities, and businesses to learn more about preparing for disasters and reducing risk to health and property. Recent flooding events in Maryland and across the nation have left many underinsured renters and homeowners displaced from their homes and potentially responsible for thousands of dollars of repairs. A FEMA official, Paul Juan, recently commented on the events, saying no home is completely safe from potential flooding. With flood insurance, survivors have peace of mind knowing they are covered in the event of a major disaster. Here in Maryland, we are now at the peak of hurricane season. Hurricanes can bring record-breaking rainfall and extreme winds, causing serious damage to homes and cars. It is essential that we prepare for unexpected disasters. For today's event, we have brought together representatives from state and federal agencies to address the topic of disaster preparedness and help you understand what you can do to protect yourself, your family, and your property. Each of the representatives today bring a wealth of knowledge on disaster preparedness, and we'll be asking them questions on how their agency can help us be better prepared before a disaster occurs. We have with us today Jessica Nussbaum, the State Individual Assistance Officer and Community Preparedness Coordinator with the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. Maryland Department of Emergency Management is a unit of state government with the primary purpose to ensure that Maryland will be adequately prepared to deal with emergencies that are beyond the capabilities of local authorities. Kevin Wagner, the Community Assistance Program Manager within the Flood Management Division for the Maryland Department of the Environment. The Maryland Department of the Environment is a government agency with the state of Maryland that implements and enforces environmental protection laws and programs. Christopher Strong, meteorologist with the National Weather Service for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, is a federal agency that works to understand and predict changes in climate, weather, oceans, and the coast. Their work supports severe weather preparedness and international shipping. And Joy Hatchett, the Associate Commissioner of the Consumer Education and Advocacy Unit with the Maryland Insurance Administration. The Maryland Insurance Administration is a state agency that regulates the business of insurance in Maryland and making sure to insurance companies and the agents and brokers that sell insurance in Maryland follow the law. We have some quick housekeeping rules. This event is being recorded. As you've acknowledged when you arrived, please leave your phones and computers on mute during the event. If you're not presenting, please keep your cameras off. If you have questions for today's speakers, and we do encourage you to ask questions, please use the chat box and make sure the questions are sent to everyone and not just specifically for the presenter or the host. We'll save some time for a Q&A period at the end of the presentation. So let's begin with our questions to the panelists. I will give each panelist an opportunity to answer. Christopher, if you don't mind starting us off and
Sure.
telling us about your role at your agency and how it relates to disaster preparedness.
Well, weather is all about disasters, right? I mean, there's just about anything that we can get in the state of Maryland. And my role is really to connect our office and our forecasters with the outside world and with the state through, Maryland Department of Emergency Management, through the broadcasters, through local counties and cities. It's all about making sure that all of the team that's out on the floor here, that's constantly watching the weather 24 hours a day and waiting for disasters and getting out advance notification of it, making sure that gets out where it needs to in the outside world as broadly as we can, so that people aren't caught unaware. Because if people are ready for a disaster, it's going to turn out so much better than the other way.
Thank you, Chris. Jessica, if you don't mind following.
Sure. So the role that I do in my job that most closely relates to preparedness is as the community preparedness coordinator. So I go out either in person to different events and do presentations, talking to community groups, faith-based groups, civic organizations about the importance of preparedness and what to do to prepare, yourself, your family, your loved ones, your household for a multitude of different kinds of disasters. Also do virtual presentations like this one. We set up tables at different events, just anywhere that we can get out to the general public and get this information out to make folks as prepared as possible.
Thank you, Jessica. Kevin?
Good afternoon, everyone. I wasn't going to do this, but I decided to just write down some words, even though we weren't supposed to prepare, but I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything, But again, first of all, thanks for having me. But my name is Kevin Wagner, and I work with Maryland Department of the Environment. And specifically, I'm in the Stormwater, Dam Safety, and Flood Management Program. So my particular role is I help to coordinate a community assistance program that essentially provides technical assistance with the National Flood Insurance Program, or NFIP. So we are kind of like the coordinating office and, the go-between, if you will, between the community and FEMA, or the Federal Emergency Management Agency that administers the National Flood Insurance Program. And when I say community, I mean any county or municipal government that has land use authority and participates in the National Flood Insurance Program. So we're talking about all 23 counties. We're talking about Baltimore City and 123 other municipalities throughout our state of Maryland. So there's kind of different pieces of that when you're talking about the National Flood Insurance Program. So I'm kind of involved in all three of these pieces, but real quick, there's a know your risk component where it's kind of map related. So FEMA issues these flood insurance rate maps, and nobody likes the maps. They're always wrong, but it kind of is a starting point to identify where risk areas are. It's not the ending point. There are other things that we need to take a look at, but it's kind of where we start, at least for flood insurance rating and development purposes. The second key piece of the NFIP is reducing the risk. So how do you do that? It's really through like floodplain management that it is administered through local codes and ordinances, for issuing permits. So you want to do a construction project on your home or business, and you got to go to local government for a permit. They'll screen that permit, and if it's in a mapped floodplain, then there's certain requirements that might come into play. So there's kind of like all these different pieces that kind of connect, and we plug into that and help the communities. And then finally, with the NFIP, you have the insure your risk component, which is related to flood insurance. So I think it was mentioned earlier already, but flood insurance is available in case you're not familiar, and it is federally backed through FEMA, or the National Flood Insurance Program. Again, FEMA administers it, but anyone can purchase it. So really, all those things I just talked about, my job is to take that into consideration and just kind of work with people, help them understand what the requirements are, help them understand the map related information. So we do a lot of outreach, we do a lot of training, but I'm here as a resource. I often talk with property owners and we'll work with them and try to help answer their questions. So hopefully, you know, you see that we're accessible. We try to answer questions, but you know, we also have local government officials that we work with. So I guess I'll kind of stop there and just wait until later in the discussion to provide more. So thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Enjoy.
Thanks, Sarah. So as Sarah mentioned in the very beginning, the Maryland Insurance Administration is the regulatory organization or agency. We're a state agency, and it's our responsibility to regulate the business of insurance. We are the agency that is responsible for making sure that the insurance companies and the people that sell insurance comply with Maryland law. Now, how that relates to disasters, basically, there are specific policies that cover losses in the event of a disaster. It could be your automobile, your homeowners, your renters, or your business policy. And we're here to try, my particular unit, the Consumer Education and Advocacy Unit, is here to make sure that you understand the particular provisions of your policy so that you know what's covered in the event of a disaster, so that you aren't surprised after there's been a flood, a tornado, or some other weather event that you're not properly covered by your particular policy. And the way we do that is, first of all, on our website, and Joyce, if you could put the website in the chat box, we have lots and lots of brochures and consumer materials that help you understand the specific coverages under your policy. And then we also, similar to Jess and Kevin, go around the state all year round to different libraries, community events, and things of that nature. And we're there to help answer your particular questions about your insurance policies. Because what we want to do is make sure that you have the right coverages and protections. So if in fact we're hit by some of these events, like we have been this summer, you know that what your particular responsibilities are going to be. So you aren't hit with thousands and thousands of dollars to pay out of pocket, when if you had just changed your insurance policy, you would have had coverage for that.
Thank you, Joy. So over the last few months, Maryland has experienced a wide variety of weather events: tornadoes, hail, severe wind, heavy rain, and flooding, just to mention a few. What has your agency been doing to help consumers prepare for these weather events? Chris?
I think from the National Weather Service, there's two things. There's long-term preparedness of being ready for, for hurricane season when it's coming through, before it gets here. And then there's the short-term readiness of getting advance notification to the population out there if there's a threat coming, so they can get that last little bit ready and get as safe as they can be. So when it comes to long-term readiness and preparedness, it's really, again, we push things and have resources directly from the National Weather Service through social media and through some of our web presence. But a lot of it's really working with the state, working with the jurisdictions, doing talks like this, public meetings that the counties and cities have across the state, and just getting out there talking about whatever threats coming up, if it's hurricane season, if it's the winter, and all the threats that brings, or what have you here. It's getting people thinking about what they need to get ready, what the next thing is that they need to get ready for as we go through all the different weather threats that we have here. And then again, once we get to short-term readiness, after you get that initial, kit and ready.gov and all the things that you can do to make you and your family safer in the long run, It's that, making sure that you're getting National Weather Service warnings to your phone, to your emails, through weather radio, all these different ways in the age of communication that you can get National Weather Service warnings, making sure you get those and get them quickly. So if it's, a winter storm that we're seeing several days away, or if it's a tornado that's forming and is going to drop in the next 5 or 10 minutes, however much advance notice that we can squeeze out and get to you, if you have the warning, if you can get it quickly, you can go that last mile and protect yourself and your family based on what that threat is.
Thank you, Chris. Jessica, if you'd like to go.
I think many of our answers are probably going to be at least somewhat similar, because the same kind of thing, like I said, we go around the state and try to do that advanced preparedness, really encouraging people to think about these events before they become immediate problems. We also rely really heavily on our social media presence. So we do a lot, especially on Facebook and Twitter. We do have other accounts on like Instagram and Nextdoor as well, but Facebook and Twitter tend to be where we have our largest audience. We do Facebook Live presentations that are kind of based around the time of year that it is. Actually, our most recent guest on Facebook Live was one of my fellow panelists here, Chris Strong from the Weather Service. So we did a presentation on hurricane season and preparedness month. So we tend to do a lot of those throughout the year. Again, just based on whatever season it is, pushing out that messaging, when we do get immediate alerts that some kind of weather issue is going to be making an appearance around the state. We push out those messages from the Weather Service. But really importantly, we also encourage people to listen to their local weather forecasts, because the National Weather Service actually has several different offices that cover different portions of the state. So while we're pushing out information, we can't always keep up as fast as the updates are coming out when we have watches and warnings and things like that. So really encouraging folks to listen to those local forecasts, to find a reputable source that they trust ahead of time is really, really important. So get just that messaging long term to make sure people are aware that these things could be coming, and then in the short term, what they need to do to be ready and to take action.
Thank you, Jessica. Kevin?
Yeah, I guess first, I just want to make it clear that our department, Maryland Department of the Environment, is primarily a state regulatory agency. So as Sarah said in the intro, I believe, we implement and enforce environmental protection laws and programs. So, we have a variety of programs that implement these federal and state laws and regulations with kind of all the intent and hope that we're helping to protect Maryland's air, water, and land resources. So I think a lot of what we do, you don't necessarily see, before the disaster, because it's kind of behind the scenes work and that sort of thing. So, but public health and safety are very important to the work that we do. We review and issue, we review applications and issue permits. We're out in the field doing inspections and that sort of thing. In my program, again, I'm in the Stormwater Dam Safety and Flood Management Program. For example, we're working on an initiative called Advancing Stormwater Resiliency in Maryland, or ASTORM. So, we all recognize flooding is getting worse. There's urban flooding, and we're trying to figure out ways to tackle that. And when you get into a regulatory world, it gets pretty tricky. You have to take into consideration geography and just, a lot of different things. But the point of it is to kind of take a comprehensive approach to stormwater and floodplain management and look at it from the watershed level. So again, it's that regulatory stuff that you don't necessarily see, but hopefully the work that we do reduces those impacts. But the hope is that everything that we do will help to also tie to infrastructure projects and federal and state funding that could assist local governments. But I did also want to recognize that we have a lot of other programs within our department that have kind of a preparedness sort of role, such as our oil control program. They regulate storage tanks and underground storage tanks for fuel and things like that. Water supply program that helps to protect our public drinking water. We have a dam safety program, and they look at ponds and dams and those related risks to make sure that these structures are safe and do not fail. But we do have a website, and I'm going to put the link in the chat here for some, things that you could do or preparedness tips that kind of touches on at least some of these programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Joy?
So as I mentioned a few minutes ago, one of the most important things that we try to encourage people to do is to understand what their policies, be it their auto, their homeowners, their renters, or their business policies cover. And from my perspective, more importantly, don't cover. And knowing that before an event is something that will assist all consumers. So we spend a lot of time really focusing on that. And then also making sure that you've taken certain steps. So in the event you do have a claim, that you can handle that claim. And I won't ever say that handling a claim is easy, but making it a little easier. And one of the things that you can do with respect to your home, your apartment, or your business is having an inventory. So we really, really encourage all property owners to make an inventory of what you have and store it someplace other than your home. So in the event of a flood, a major wind, or a fire, having that inventory will make the claims process a lot easier. And if you want tips on how to do that inventory, on our website, we have a couple of videos that you can use to do that. And you don't have to write everything down. A lot of people will say, well, I don't have time to do a line by line inventory. That's fine. Pictures or videos are fine. But when you're doing that, don't just take pictures and videos of the big stuff. The things that are in your closets, the things that are in the garage, the things that are in your drawers add up quickly. So just take that cell phone and go around and take pictures of everything. And then make sure that you update it. And what I tell people is the best time to update it is after either the holidays, a birthday, or some other event, so that at least yearly you're making that update, so that your inventory, when the insurance company, and yes, they have the right to do this, ask you for proof of what you've lost, having that inventory will make matters so much easier.
Thank you, Joy. So we're just beginning the more intense part of the hurricane season. In Maryland, we often get heavy rain and gusty winds from remnant storms. But what do we as Marylanders from the mountains of Garrett County to the Atlantic coast need to be prepared for? Chris?
Yeah, so from the weather side of the coin, I mean, one of the biggest things to remember, whether you're a longtime resident of the state, native to the state, or somebody that's moved in more recently, is there's what we usually deal with here in Maryland, and then there's what we need to be ready for that can happen. And certainly heavy rains and flooding, we've seen that over the years from even remnant storms that have passed through. We've seen some pretty big wind storms with Tropical Storm Isabel when that came through in the early 2000s. And there's certainly areas of the state that can discount certain threats, like, if you're away from tidal zones, in central or western Maryland, out in Frederick and Garrett counties, you're never going to have to worry about tidal flooding. You're never going to have to worry about rip currents. but you will need to worry about not only the potential for rainfall flooding and rainfall flooding that can be so much worse than you've seen it. Also the tornadic threat that can come with these storms. It's a big collection of thunderstorms, so if conditions are right, you can get tornadoes that form from these storms. And then the wind threat, which really is not usually our thing here in Maryland, because these storms usually hit down in the southeast U.S. or the Gulf Coast, and then they come up here. And the wind threat is really the first thing to degrade once after the storm's made landfall. But when we get like our Sandy track down here, where a storm really makes more of a direct assault on Maryland from the open ocean right into Maryland, especially if it's a stronger storm, a Category 1 or 2 hurricane, it's going to be a lot worse than anybody here has seen, in terms of the wind damage, the amount of trees that'll be down, even structural damage, things like that, because we just aren't geared we aren't built for, like South Florida is for these hurricane threats. We don't have palm trees and things that are geared towards that kind of wind. So if we get, those gusts of, 70, 80, 90 miles an hour, think about the derecho for those that were around for that in 2012, and even worse wind damage than that, it'll really set us back. And that's the kind of thing that I think that we're all talking about that we need to be collectively ready for, is being able to be self-reliant, be on your own, without power, without services, for a few days. Because if we get into a true disaster that's beyond the usual thing here in Maryland, which eventually is going to come, that's the kind of thing that we really need to be ready for when you're developing your kits, developing your plans, is that caliber event that comes around once in a very great while. And that's the thing I'd probably lean on most.
Thank you, Chris. Jessica?
Once again, I'm not sure if Chris is cheating off of my notes or I'm cheating off of his, but our
We've done this
message is
together.
very, very similar. Looking at my notes, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I had too. Flooding, please, even if you do not live on the coast or with a river in your backyard, please, please, please be aware that it can flood at your home. If it can rain at your home, it can flood at your home. All of the rest of my panelists, I think this is one of all of our soapbox topics, because so many times I've been at events or I've been doing damage assessments after, some kind of disaster, some kind of flooding event has happened. And the number of people who, one, were told by their insurance providers, oh, you don't have to worry about that. You're not in a flood zone. You can't buy flood insurance. The people who just think, oh, I live on top of a hill, so it can't possibly flood at my home, or just the simple, it's never flooded here before, so I thought I was safe. We are seeing so many more flooding events in areas where we wouldn't have thought, yes, there are common events, Ellicott City. Yeah, we know that area is prone to flooding, but other portions of like Harford County, Carroll County, Frederick County, places that are not coastal communities, and even those that are, and in Southern Maryland. And we've seen so many flood events. Out of all of the things that I've responded to in the 9 years I've been with emergency management, the large majority have been flooding events. And they've been these very isolated storms where, inches of rain just dump in a really short period of time. Please be prepared for flooding, even if you don't think you have to be. If you're not in a high risk flood zone, insurance is relatively affordable. When it comes to, the flood insurance adding on, your homeowners, your renters insurance, typically probably 99% of the time will not cover water that comes in from the outside due to a flooding event. I'm probably stepping on some toes with Kevin and Joy because like this is their thing, but it's also like just very, very near and dear to me because of what I've seen in the recovery process across the state from these different events. So I would say number one, definitely flooding. Elevate your things. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. Make sure you don't have important valuables on the ground and lift them up. Elevate your utilities, your HVAC systems. I could go on and on for hours, so I will stop myself. There's a lot of resources out there to help tell you what to do to get yourself prepared. And just like Chris said, also the tornadoes, the high winds that can come with a lot of these storms. Make sure that your property's prepared for that. You've trimmed back trees and shrubbery and anything that can become projectiles through your window, when those, or your glass doors, when those winds crank up. Make sure you have a wind rider if one is necessary on your insurance, because we've seen people that haven't had that, thought they were covered because they had homeowners, didn't have wind coverage. And then other things you can do are just considered an all hazards approach to preparedness. So you can do certain things that are going to help you, whether it's a blizzard, a tornado, a flood, a long-term power outage, things like that. So having that emergency supply kit, having your family communications plan updated, having your vehicle maintenance, really, really important. Even, just down to making sure you have gas in case you have to evacuate or leave your home if you do lose power for an extended period of time. And I just want to really quick talk about our Know Your Zone Hurricane Evacuation Zone campaign. And I'll put the link to that in the chat. But it's knowyourzonemd.com. Any place in the state of Maryland, you can type in that address, whether you live there, friends or family live there, you travel there, to see if it is in a hurricane evacuation zone. So still really important to know this time of year. And it will tell you if you're in zone A, B, or C, or if you're not in a zone at all, it will tell you that as well. And also you'll find information on hurricane preparedness at that website as well. So it's a really good resource, again, especially for this time of year as things could potentially be ramping up.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Kevin?
Well, thank you, Chris and Jess. I think, I only have to say maybe 10 words now. I mean, everybody's heard the F word already, and I'm not talking about the other one. I'm talking about flood, so that's the same old story with me. Flooding is our #1 natural hazard in Maryland. As Jess kind of mentioned, and Chris, it's caused by a variety of different ways. Our state is just so diverse. Maryland's called America in miniature, and I really think that's true because I get to travel from one end of the state to the other. So I see the extremes of the elevation changes out in Garrett County, Allegheny County, where the stream profile really moves quickly. The water moves quickly. Where you get towards the coast and the beaches, you have different types of flooding. You have, urban flooding as we go through our urban areas and city areas, and tidal flooding, storm surge, all that kind of stuff. So in fact, just yesterday, we were talking before we started this call, we had a rain event come through the state yesterday in the Hagerstown area. I think Chris said it was over 2 inches of rain that had fallen. So we're seeing streets and roadways flooding, and it also has implications with our property. So I think I would say more of the same kind of stuff, but it seems overwhelming. But just kind of look around your home or business and see what you can do to reduce your flood risk. It could be something simple, just like getting things off the floor and putting it on shelves. Okay, we can all do that. I've also heard people say, well, we have a basement and we know we're going to get some water in there. So, if your washer and dryer's down there, maybe put those items up on pedestals. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It could be blocks. It could be old pallets, or whatever you have. Look around your house outside, or your gutters. We hate cleaning our gutters, but hey, getting that water to run through these systems and away from where we live, that's really important. So these are things that are, I'd say, low to no cost. And then, there's other things that we could do that may cost some money, and the cost range of these things vary. But, look at your lower areas, like a sump pump system with a battery backup. It's not helpful to have a sump pump that runs on electricity and then the electricity goes out and you can't run the sump pump. So having some kind of a battery backup system is really important. Backflow prevention devices on drains. So if you're in a basement or an area in your living space or business, preventing that water from backing up and causing other types of damage. There's some really gross stuff in floodwaters, as we all know. Waterproofing basement walls, installing like French drain systems. These start to get a little bit more expensive. You might need to consult a licensed contractor, and you can find a licensed contractor on the Department of Labor website. It's just a great tool I've used it in the past myself, just figure out who's licensed. We want to make sure that we're hiring people that have gone through that process, or vetted, and all that kind of stuff. But other things are looking at your electrical mechanical systems. So your HVAC, your hot water heater, is there an opportunity to elevate that? Are you going to be replacing it? And if it is located in an area that is known to flood, maybe we can elevate that during the replacement. Other things that get a little more technical are these things called flood openings. So if your home or business is elevated on like a crawl space, for example, you want to have flood openings to allow water to enter and exit freely in these enclosed areas. Because if you don't, you're going to have a lot of water pressure up in a flood event that's going to build in that wall, and it could potentially cause structural damage. So if you need help with those kinds of things, reach out to your local floodplain manager, reach out to me. I'd be glad to kind of talk you through that. But, start incorporating these sort of mitigation actions into your home or business as you make improvements. And also consider using like flood damage resistant materials. So get away from the mindset of using traditional drywall and fiberglass and start thinking about other things like cement board and brick and stone and sprayed, polyurethane foam and insulation. Again, instead of these traditional materials that if they get soggy, we have to tear it out and throw it away anyway. But they promote mold, which is terrible from a health perspective. So, it's like changing our mindset. If we know we have issues and we're doing projects, we don't necessarily have to do this all at once, but as we change these things, maybe we can incorporate these practices. But since the question also kind of alluded to like wind events that we're seeing more of, think about your outside and securing loose items and putting your chairs away and deck boxes and all that kind of stuff. But again, as you do improvement projects, as homeowners, one of the big ones that we often have to do is replacing our shingles. And something I learned a few years back that really I didn't even think about until they had mentioned it. But when they lay the roof sheathing on your your trusses, that plywood or sheathing material, many times they don't really tape the joints. But think about it, if a wind event peels off all those shingles and there's a driving rain that gets into those cracks of the sheathing, that could trickle into your house and cause water damage. So the simple sort of mitigation technique of adding some taping and, might be less than $500. The building code might be requiring that now. I'm not real sure, but, think about that with your roofing contractor and ask if that's something that they could do, maybe. But, all these kinds of things is just kind of thinking about what kind of risks or hazards we have and what we could do to start doing something about it. As Jess mentioned, flood insurance and Joy, of course, we're encouraging that. That's a big part of what I do, is to working with local governments to make sure that you have access to flood insurance. So we do all the behind the scenes that you have that, and we can help you with some of the technical aspects of that. But renters can purchase it. They can get a contents coverage. Homeowners, business owners, doesn't matter. But, I guess the key is just take a first step, try to do something, look around your home or business, what's at risk, what you can do. And another good thing that I've heard people say, I think it was somebody from MDEM years ago, is just get to know your neighbors, exchange contact information, your phone numbers. And in the event you're away, you need to call somebody and they need to go check on something for you, or vice versa. We can all kind of help each other.
That was great. Thank you, Kevin. Joy?
So a couple of things, they've already been said, but I want to make sure that folks have actually heard them. So in terms of flood insurance, I know there still are some people that do not think they can purchase flood insurance. And let me emphasize this. Only in a very, very few communities is flood insurance not available. You do not need to live in a designated flood zone in order to purchase flood insurance. You can purchase flood insurance frequently through, it's not a private insurance product, but frequently the same entity that sold you your homeowner's insurance will also sell you a separate flood insurance policy. So you should contact your agent and ask them. And if the agent says, you don't need it, I don't sell it, you can't buy it, check with someone else. you can go to the website floodsmart.gov to get the purchasing information from an insurance agent that will sell you a flood insurance policy. Also, if you look at our website, there are some private insurance companies that will sell you flood insurance. So that's the first thing you need to take away. If someone tells you you can't buy it, don't stop there. Because as Jeff just said, if it can rain at your house, it can flood at your house. The next thing I want to touch on is we really focused a lot on flooding. But this summer, we've had a lot of people that have had damage from fallen trees. We've had automobiles, homes, and businesses damaged from trees. And this is one of the things that I tell people as a part of the mitigation. First of all, if you hear a storm is coming, as Kevin mentioned, move those items that may fly into your home from off the deck or the porch. But also, before that storm, walk the property and see, are there any trees that are dead or dying? Any limbs that are already broken? Remove those. And sometimes, I mean, I just had to do it myself. Go out and get a tree taken down, because I watched as the wind sort of did this with the tree. And I knew that if I didn't take steps, that tree could come down on my house. So what you do is take steps before a storm to help mitigate against potential loss. And here's the flip side of it. After the storm, before the next one, walk your property again. So if there are any broken limbs or anything that might damage your home, take care of those now, as opposed to having that tree that's almost ready to fall, not doing anything, and having it fall. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Joy. So, do you guys have any other words of wisdom that you'd like to provide consumers? Jessica?
The most important thing that I can say, and this is kind of coming from, again, the other part of what I do, which is recovery after a disaster event. If you believe that after an event, FEMA is going to show up at your house and give you a big check to replace the items that have been lost, to repair your home, to reimburse you for expenses that you might have had as you're starting your recovery, that is not going to happen. Even if we do, and this is another very lengthy discussion that you know I've done many presentations on, but there's a whole process for us to get a disaster declaration from the president in order to make those FEMA funds even available to the residents of Maryland. We have not seen one of those declarations in 10 years. And 10 years ago, as a result of Sandy, it was only for one county, which got denied the first time around, and we had to appeal that decision. So it is definitely not easy to get that federal funding into a community after a disaster. So you really do need to take whatever steps to protect yourself, your family, your loved ones, and your property. Is it always inexpensive? No, but it is more expensive to try to worry about it after the fact and try to replace everything and not take any kind of preparedness actions. Again, you know, Kevin talked about some low to no cost things that you can do, you know, as far as elevating items and things like that. Insurance. Is it the have all end all? Will it cover every possible thing that you might have lost? No, but will it help? Yes. And again, that's why it's really important for you to know your policy and know what it will and will not cover. Even if you don't believe in insurance or you don't feel that it's right for you, save money, put aside money, have a separate savings account for potential disaster recovery, because it may never happen to you. And if it does, we all hope it doesn't. Yeah, every single day we hope that none of these events impact us. But if they do, you want to be ready for it. So it's better to have that money set aside as you're able. I fully understand that's not affordable or an option for a lot of people, but as much as you are able to do, put money aside, invest in some insurance, or do things around your home to protect yourself and your property. So, so, so important to do whatever you are able to ahead of time, because after the fact isn't the time to make that happen. So I think there's a huge misconception that is sometimes perpetuated after disasters, that the federal government is going to come in with all of this assistance, or the state is going to come in with all of this assistance. And unfortunately, the financial side of things is very lacking. Even if as a state, we were to see that declaration, the average national payout from FEMA across the board for individuals and households to recover is between $3,000 and $4,000. Some people get more, some people get less. But even the full, if you are able to get the total amount of money, it's just over $70,000 between two different programs. So again, if you've lost everything, $70,000 likely is not going to do it. Housing prices and material prices are really up there right now. So just so important to put a little bit of thought, a little bit of time, maybe a little bit of money into preparing yourself ahead of time, and it will be very, very worth it if and when you have to use it.
Thanks, Jessica. Kevin?
Yes, thank you. And I hope I'm not stealing Chris's thunder here, because this is a message that comes from his agency all the time, and we've all heard it. But, please, 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 pretty please with sugar on top, do not drive through a flooded roadway. You cannot tell how deep the water is or how fast it's moving, So it might seem like, okay, I can make it, just don't do it. Just turn around. Yeah, it's inconvenient. And, maybe it was okay, maybe it wasn't. Just play it safe, turn around, find another place to go, another route. Not only are you putting your life in danger and the lives of the people in the vehicle with you in danger, but you're also putting the lives of first responders in danger. These are often volunteers in the community. So we've all heard it many, many times, the TAD, turn around, don't drown, TAD, TADD. But some quick facts here that we throw around a lot in the business, but 6 inches of water can reach the bottom of most passenger cars, and it can certainly cause you to lose control and maybe even stall your vehicle. So once you're sitting in that, then you're stuck. But a foot of water can float some smaller vehicles. I mean, you see some of these bigger SUVs and trucks, it's a foot may not be okay, maybe okay, but still a foot for some smaller vehicles might float them. And then 2 feet of rushing water could certainly carry away most vehicles, and you don't want to be in that situation. That is bad news then. So let's think about those kinds of things. Let's all get home safely to our loved ones, and just turn around, don't drown.
Thanks, Kevin. Chris?
I mean, 2 quick things. Just if I convey 2 things, it's just make sure that you get National Weather Service warnings to your phone or email or through your phone app. Just make sure you get those warnings and get them quickly. It'll go a long way in keeping yourself and your family safe. And then the second thing is just have a kit and plan for what to do when those weather hazards / potential disasters come through. Getting that message so you're ready and then knowing what to do. It's really what it's all about in my book.
Thank you, Chris. Joy?
I would just say visit all of our websites. I think everybody that is presenting today, our websites are full of excellent tips. And so that you you're trying to probably take notes or whatever today, you're not going to necessarily remember. But all of us have great information that you can use to help protect yourselves, your families, your businesses. And just remember that preparedness is something that you should be doing all year long.
That's super important. So this ends our formal questions for today's event, and I will start the Q&A session. And again, I want to encourage all of the attendees, if you have any questions, please enter them in the chat. We do have a few questions already. I'm going to bring up to the beginning. So, does anyone know, who do you call to elevate HVAC and utilities? This is from Janice.
Yeah, I'll try to take a stab at that. I would say that the contractors, the HVAC contractors, your electricians should be able to help you with that. I mean, it's probably like a non-traditional sort of service. We're trying to work with contractors, and we'll get some really savvy ones that actually look at the flood maps, and they'll contact us and get ask us what the flood zone is and what elevation they need to get to. But you may have to educate the contractors. Hey, I live in a risky area. It's flooded here. Can you elevate it? So again, the HVAC contractors, the electricians, they could probably help you with that.
Joy, this one's probably for you. Who do you call to get flood insurance? And if you're not in a flood zone? And I think we've answered it, but if you'd like to.
Yeah, let me just say once again, the place to start is whoever sold you your homeowners, renters, or commercial policy. I would start by giving them a call and asking them if they sell flood insurance. And if the answer is no, then go to floodsmart.gov. And in that website, you'll enter your zip code, and they will tell you who sells the product that's issued by the National Flood Insurance Program. You'll also hear that referred to as NFIP. Also, if you go to our website and look at the flood insurance page, there are some private entities that sell flood insurance. But I would always start with whoever sold you your homeowners, renters, or business insurance policy.
Thank you, Joy. I think this is also expanding on flood insurance. So Karen asked, what does flood insurance actually cover? I heard that it only covers major systems, not just property, personal property.
So this is a very lengthy discussion, and I will keep it very brief, but go to our website also, and you can look specifically at what's covered and the types of coverages that are available. So first of all, flood insurance is not like your homeowner's insurance policy. In order to have coverage for everything, if you are a homeowner, you have to buy a policy that covers the structure, and then a separate policy to cover your personal property. And so if you have both policies, then for the most part, your things will be covered. However, there is very limited coverage for those items that are in your basement. And the definition of a basement gets very technical. So once again, I would say take a look at our specific website, and then you can also go to floodsmart.gov, and that once again will give you the specific information about the types of policies the actual dollar limitation on those policies, and what is and isn't covered in a basement.
Well, speaking about basements, Jessica, I think this one might be actually for you. Who can I contact to figure out the best place in my basement for a tornado to shelter in place? We've already had 2 homes in the neighborhood that were destroyed.
So the best place during those kind of events would be the most interior part of your home, away from any kind of, especially glass, doors or windows, but putting as many walls in between yourself and the outside as possible. So whatever that most interior place is, away from any kind of windows or doors.
This one also might be for you. Do you know a place where people can get sandbags?
I believe that normally when they're available, your local jurisdiction would be making announcements about that. So I'd really kind of stay tuned to your local Office of Emergency Management. So each county has an emergency management office, as well as Baltimore City, the town of Ocean City, and the city of Annapolis. So just check them out. A lot of them have Facebook pages, but they all have websites and contact information. So you could even call them ahead of time, reach out to see what their process is for when sandbags are available. But I know I've seen a lot of like announcements on social media, like the location of that when the time comes.
Also wanted to add real quick on that, so you do have the traditional sandbags that it requires manual labor to fill these things. But I'm also seeing that there are new products on the market now, and have been for a while. They're sandless, so they're water activated. So you could actually lay these things down, and as the water comes, they'll water activate, just like a diaper, if you will. And then it makes it really heavy, of course, but then it kind of seals that area. So if you Google like sandless bags or water activated sandbags, you can find that.
That's awesome. Thank you, Kevin.
And Kevin, do you also want to speak for a minute? Because I know if you have a flood insurance policy, there are certain things that the flood insurance policy will cover if in fact there's anticipation of a flooding event.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what exactly that portion of the standard flood insurance policy is called, but flood loss avoidance, I think, is the kind of terminology. So it could provide up to $1,000 for preventative measures that you take to prevent flooding impacts to your property. So things like sandbags, or plastic sheathing, or things like that. So I think some pumps are on the list as well. But if that's of interest, in fact, I'll Google real quick. I think there's an easy fact sheet I can find. I'll put that in the chat for you. But it kind of goes over some of the more of the details.
Thank you, Kevin. Janice asked, what can we do if there's a huge tree on my neighbor's property?
So, Janice, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if your neighbor's tree falls on your property, generally speaking, the damage is going to be the responsibility of your homeowner's insurance. And let me repeat that. Your neighbor's tree falls on your property, that is the responsibility of your insurance company. The only time that that may not be the case is if, in fact, your neighbor's tree was dead and your neighbor was put on notice that that dead tree was going to fall on your property the next time the wind blew. And in those circumstances, it's not always the case. What would end up happening is, generally speaking, you would first go ahead and be filing a claim with your insurance company, and your insurance company would make the determination whether or not to go against your neighbor's insurance company. So what I would say is talk to your neighbor and tell your neighbor your concerns and your issues, But once again, that if something were to happen, that is going to be the responsibility of your insurance policy.
This one's from Charlene. What can we expect after a natural disaster to our property as far as government assistance in timing?
So again, just want to reinforce that government assistance does not frequently come in after a disaster. It has to be a disaster of such a size that the federal government feels that the community cannot recover without it. Sometimes there are community organizations that come in, like our voluntary organizations active in disaster, some other faith-based organizations, things like that, that come in pretty much immediately after a disaster to help with those, immediate needs like feeding and sheltering and clothing. We have other state agencies like the Department of Human Services that is working really quickly on things like that. So there's immediate life safety, making sure people are fed, people are clothed, people have their medications, people are temporarily sheltered. But if you're looking at an answer about how quickly government assistance comes in to help you replace your roof or whatever, it may not come. And that's really what I wanted to emphasize. More often than not, if we do have some kind of weather event that has impacted the state, we might see the Small Business Administration come in with their disaster loan program. They have a separate declaration process. But again, those are loans. So you have to be able to qualify for them. You have to show, the credit worthiness and the ability to pay them back. And it's a loan. Again, a lot of people, once they hear that L word, they aren't interested in that either, because it is something that has to be paid back. It's not like the grant funding would be after a major disaster where FEMA would get involved. So if we were to get one of those declarations, we have about 30 days to put in the request for the declaration, and then it has to go through various channels, including our FEMA regional office, FEMA headquarters, and then it gets to the president. So it can be a rather lengthy process. It is nothing immediate. So again, if we do get it, it still isn't something like the next week, FEMA has money in your checking account for you. So again, long story short, just assume that we're not going to get that kind of assistance, because if we do, it has been a really, really bad day for a lot of people.
Chris, I think this next one's for you. What weather app should we have for notification on our phone?
So the National Weather Service doesn't have a phone app because we're trying to, as an agency, trying to maintain the private sector and the public sector and having us work together. Whereas, we produce the warnings, but then the private sector does so well with apps and keeping them up to date and having the very latest and greatest. So I would look for an app. If you're looking through weather apps, look for something that includes National Weather Service warnings directly from the government. I know that the Coast Guard, as well as FEMA, the Red Cross emergency app, all three of those apps, FEMA, Coast Guard, Red Cross emergency, all do push weather warnings for your county through those apps. So that's another way to go as well. But as for recommending one private sector app over another, can't do that as being in the federal government, but there's a lot of options out there, a lot of good options, as well as through your broadcasters out there who we work with as well to get our warnings through them.
To echo what Chris said, I have the FEMA app installed on my phone, and they just recently made some changes to it, but it's really good. I mean, they tie into the National Weather Service's alerts, and I think you can pick up to 5 different geographic areas, and it will automatically give you warnings and alerts. But what I really like about it is it also kind of gives you some things to think about from a disaster preparedness side. A lot of things I talked about mitigation actions and sump pumps and all that kind of stuff, that the app has a lot of that in there.
Thanks, Kevin. And I think, Joy, I'm not sure if you want to expand on it, because I think you've already touched on the trees, but this is from Karen. I understood in the past that unless you document that you wrote a letter to your neighbor about the risk their tree posed, your insurance company won't cover a loss. Is that accurate?
Yes, Karen. And as I stated, that basically you need to put your neighbor on written notice. But just because you do that does not definitely mean that your insurance company will cover it. So at the end of the road, if your neighbor isn't on notice, then the chances of it getting covered are slim and none. But even if they are on notice, your insurance company may still not cover it.
Thank you, Joy. And then our last question, this is from Margaret. I live in a forest neighborhood and I need dozens of trees dealt with. I also have to replace my roof before it collapses. I feel like I need to coach on where and how to focus my specific unpreparedness. Are you saying the Department of Aging may have any ideas?
Yeah, so I think let me start, and I invite my colleagues to jump in. But Margaret, I think direct messaged me. I don't know by accident, but I responded to her. So she was looking for some disaster preparedness help specifically for seniors, disabled. So I suggested that maybe the Department of Aging might be a good group to reach out to. I know we had done a workshop in the past with Baltimore City, and I was really impressed with some of the folks that worked in their aging department, just with preparedness information and things like that. So that's a good place to start. But you also have like a local emergency management office, that can really help with a lot of preparedness type stuff. But I try to help people as best I can and give them some general guidance, but at the same time, you got to be careful. I can't come out and do individual property inspection, look at your house and say, oh yeah, you need a new roof. You really need to kind of get somebody who's specialized in that sort of thing, who's licensed. So, finding a licensed contractor, I think, is still a good idea. Could it cost some money? Maybe. A lot of times you can get free estimates and that sort of thing, but at least they might give you some guidance. But I did put a link in the chat to the Department of Labor's website where you can research who is licensed, whether it's an individual or business.
So Margaret, in addition to the agencies that Kevin has referred you to, depending on what jurisdiction you live in, there may be specific programs through their Department of Housing and Community Development to assist with renovations, rehabilitation, and things along those lines to your home. So Joyce, if you could put the link to the DHCD in general, and then Margaret, what I would advise you is to go to your local jurisdiction, their local Department of Housing and Community Development, because there may be lots of programs there, but that is truly going to depend on the specific jurisdiction. So I would start with the state and then also try your whatever county, or if you happen to live in the city, because there are plenty of programs that are out there, especially for seniors.
Thank you, Joy. That's great information. So you guys can find more information on disaster readiness on ready.gov and the websites of our partners. I do see we have one more question. Do we have time for one more question? Yeah. Margaret asked, are there disaster preparation professionals? That's a alliteration.
I think I kind of touched on that. Sorry, Joy, but your local emergency management office is certainly a great point of contact, and they're often overwhelmed. Everybody's contacting them for help and stuff like that, so it might take a little while, but that would be a good resource. Sorry, Joy.
And so, Margaret, what I would say is there are quote unquote professionals, but many of those charge for their services. So the place that I would start would be to the different agencies, look at their websites for tips and information that you can get for free, because a lot of these things you can do yourself without paying for those services. And then if you feel as if you're in a position where you really need some assistance, try some of your local groups. Sometimes someone in the community through churches or places of worship may be able to help. And in some communities, there are organizations called CERTs, and they can actually help as well. I know all of us have limited money these days, so I would really encourage you to take advantage of the free resources before you go out and pay someone for assistance.
So that ends all of our questions. Thank you to all of our presenters today and everybody that attended our Lunch with Mia. Please visit our website for upcoming Lunch with Mia events at www.insurance.maryland.gov and sign up for event alerts. And we'll also post our website in the chat. You can also find our presenters' contact information on the slide if you have any further questions. So thank you guys.